Hello and welcome to Real Insights. Today we're talking with Michael Hodges, Managing Director of Capital Markets at Christie & Co. Please note, today's episode was recorded before the general election.
Welcome to Sire Capital Partners podcast, Real Insights, where we give you access to the expertise and insights of real estate industry leaders. Michael, thanks for being here.
Well, that's quite a welcome. Time flies, doesn't it? It's good to be here.
Great. So firstly, I just want to ask, and for the benefit of some of our listeners who may not know the healthcare sector as an investment opportunity, from the top down, can you break down the subsectors that sort of fit underneath the healthcare sector?
Sure. Well, healthcare is a big industry, obviously, and I was thinking about this question, and I think you can actually break it down in one of two ways. If you're an investor looking to come in, you can either invest in the operational business, and that's the route that many have gone in healthcare, private equity companies, entrepreneurs, family offices, and so forth. Or you can invest in the more prop-co-opco type structures.
Sure.
So essentially, there are two ways of investing in healthcare, and in different countries, you have a prevalence for one, possibly more than the others. In the UK, we have a situation where the vast majority of care businesses are generally owned by the operators. So there's more of an operational focus, the operation and the real estate being combined. But we're also seeing a considerable move now towards sort of sale and leaseback prop co-opco, where we've got real estate investors and others coming into the market, and that's super exciting.
Right. Brilliant. And then with the various subsectors that we have underneath the healthcare space, when you're looking to analyse them and look at their performance, is there any crossover between those sectors, or are they almost sort of variously pretty much treated in isolation?
Well, there are many common themes across the different sectors. I mean, fundamentally, healthcare is needs driven. So you have to look at the demand for the particular type of service that's required, that's being delivered. Where is the opportunity in the market relative to that? And then you have all the normal metrics of looking at an operational business. I mean, from a real estate play, the rent is driven by the trading performance. So everything kind of works through the lens of the P&L account, I guess. But you also have healthcare as a regulated market, which I think is also attractive for investors. You have a third-party regulator in England. It's the Care Quality Commission that provides ratings for every healthcare service. So again, whatever you're looking at, it will have a CQC rating. So you're being guided by that in terms of how well the business is being run. Are there any sort of issues or concerns, etc.
Right. Okay. Great. In terms of just coming back up to the top level, the healthcare sector itself, what do you think are the main drivers of investment into the healthcare sector in the UK and globally, for that matter?
Well, as I mentioned a little while ago, healthcare is needs driven, and I think that is one of the biggest drivers for investment into the space, and also the longevity of the space. There is a need to provide care for people, whatever their condition is, whether it's a young person setting, or whether it's for our elderly population, or whether it's with people with specialist healthcare needs. That is always going to be there, and we've got a situation where the population is aging, is living longer, with an ever-increasing degree of need and more complex conditions,
Sure.
which underpins the need for healthcare. And if you think of other sectors where you've had, you think of the pandemic, where everyone's gone away from going to the retail high street, people have gone to Amazon, there's been obviously the internet and so forth. That can't replace healthcare.
No.
People need healthcare, people need carers to deliver the care, and people need buildings to occupy to receive the care if they're required to move out of their own home. So.
Sure.
Those are the key underpins of the healthcare market, and I think those are the unique features of the healthcare market compared to other sort of property sectors.
Sure. And you mentioned Amazon and that sort of leads into technology a bit there. Looking at healthcare specifically, what do you see some key innovations within the space itself? within the UK, and how do we sort of compare to other countries in that implementation of innovation?
Well, I think it's interesting because you think of healthcare globally, and you think of childcare as well, and you go to sort of Asia, and you've got wacky things like robots being used for certain things in early years settings. But sort of closer to home, I mentioned in my last answer that healthcare is not being replaced by this Amazon or the internet or anything like that. But operators are harnessing all the benefits of technology to improve the delivery of care services and to innovate, and that's super important in terms of making sure people in a care home, for example, are connected to their relatives. So the ability to have video calls and to connect and to see people that may live hundreds of miles away, to have that degree of connectivity. And that, to some extent, was borne out through the COVID pandemic. Operators were thinking, well, how can I connect people living in my care home to the family group that it's harder to visit? So technology sort of came in there. You also have the move towards electronic care planning, but you also have the move to technology actually in the buildings themselves. You look at the latest generation of new build care home with ESG considerations, building in solar panels into the roofs, putting Tesla power batteries on the walls, etc. All this technology is enhancing the delivery of care, creating sort of sustainable, future fit environments and future fit sort of products for the delivery of care.
Yeah, and funny, you touched on the pandemic and ESG, which sort of segues nicely into my next point. I was going to look at impacts on the healthcare sector in both the pandemic and ESG. Obviously, huge impact. So just coming to the obviously the COVID pandemic itself. So in your assessment, what have been the impacts, both in terms of the challenges we've come up against and potential opportunities, maybe from lessons learned?
Sure. Well, I think firstly we have to take our hats off to all of the people working in the healthcare industry through the pandemic. It was a very, very challenging time for them, but once again, I think the sector demonstrated how good it is at sort of dealing with challenging situations. And I think the social standing of care workers actually was really enhanced by the pandemic, and I think that's definitely a positive. And that's had various different meanings and outcomes. So we've had more people, more investors now looking to invest in healthcare because they've learnt about it through the pandemic, and they've seen that there are all kinds of different care services care providers providing services to people. And again, coming back to that need thing, there's a recognition that this is a needs-driven industry. You can't shut a care home in the pandemic in the way that you can shut a restaurant or a shop. So you have that underpin there. And as I say, I think the use of technology, both the providers of care, but also how, for example, organisations like ourselves, how we operate now. We were still advising, transacting care services through the pandemic when you couldn't get into the care services. So we had to innovate and introduce things like virtual tours. So it's across the board. It's sort of how the services innovated and taken learnings from that period to improve what they're doing. But it's also the same for advisors, people like ourselves working in the sector, how we had to innovate and actually how things have changed for the better. We're providing less disruption to care homes. We're not having to get so many people in. We can get things done in a way which sort of plays to the strengths of technology that we now have.
And that's I mean, it's amazing to think that at least there's some positives that can be drawn out of such a tragic period in our time.
Well, absolutely, and you can argue this point one of two ways. I mean, some people will say that the pandemic caused or made social care and the NHS, for example, work better together, and there is certainly some good legs to that sort of argument. But equally, we all saw the news headlines of people being discharged from hospitals into care homes without the correct assessments, which created a challenge. But sort of, I think generally adversity creates creates opportunity, and people take forward learnings and so forth. And now we've seen the sector as a whole rebound incredibly strongly, and
Sure.
and also relatives really value the role that care services provide, having to keep people at home for longer and look after people through that very difficult period. There is a lot that goes into providing care, which care professionals provide, that we as individuals maybe less well equipped to provide.
Yeah, sure. And then just turning to your other point you mentioned earlier, ESG. Obviously that's hugely important right now, and as we go into the future, that's going to become even more so.
Yeah.
So from an investor's point of view, how important do you think it is that they consider not only the financial and operational aspects of an investment, but also the environmental and social aspects as well?
Well, healthcare fundamentally has got very good ESG credentials, as a starting point, and I think we have to acknowledge that. But investors that are coming in, particularly if they're real estate investors taking a 30-year lease, for example, are thinking about what the future looks like, and it's having that sort of future fit sort of product. And many investors now are being driven by the organisations providing capital into their funds, and there are key requirements now for hitting certain ESG metrics. There are some funds, for example, that are specifically targeting a net zero type strategy, but then there are more general things around. Obviously, we have the EPC ratings in the UK.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of investors now are saying to us that they want to target facilities that are either at or can get to EPC B in the near term. But it goes a lot further than that. It sort of goes into how you build new build care homes, and obviously we've had the challenge of spiralling build costs with inflation. So you sort of think, well, actually, how can you create these additional features in buildings at a rate that doesn't become prohibitive?
Yes.
And developers have all been working hard to come up with new concepts. And a colleague of mine actually visited a new LNT care home a few weeks ago in Lydney, and it's quite incredible how those products have come on over the years. You now have the solar panels built into the roof rather than being on the roof. You have the Tesla power wall on the side. You have the heat pumps and so forth. And you sort of compare that product to, say, a care home that was built 20 years or so ago. There's a big difference there. So investors are going to, and there's also a price point difference as well. Those brand new build assets have a higher value and have good longevity. But we have a lot of care facilities in the UK that are older assets. But many providers in those assets are taking great steps to improve their ESG credentials, introducing sort of new technology in the homes, looking at quick wins such as light fittings and how they're replacing the heating system and so forth. But it's a key thing, and we're seeing it with banks also now. Criteria going forward is going to be looking more and more of this.
Yeah, sure. And just really further to that, the sort of looking within the care space, as you were mentioning, you obviously got those new builds coming on, and like you say, the requirements there and the costs of delivering those are obviously going to make the room rates higher. Is obviously there's a big mid-market space there in the care, and you briefly alluded to it. Is there a big opportunity there for delivering retrofitting that existing stock and bringing that up into up to standard?
Well, it's an interesting question, and I think it all depends on what the stock actually is.
Yeah, sure.
If you've got a converted facility which maybe started out as a rectory or something, or even a terrace of properties that's being converted together, there's only so much you can do in terms of retrofitting. If you've got a purpose-built care home that's got quite big bedrooms, for example, but doesn't have ensuite wet rooms, but you've got sufficient space to provide those, then those are quicker wins. But But ultimately, it has to be every situation has to be looked at in its own right, and you also have to look at whether you're going as an investor or an operator, you're going to get the return on that investment. Is there the market there? If you upgrade the facility to more of a quasi private pay product and you put that investment in, are you going to be able to get that return through in terms of enhanced fee levels? Or is it going to be a situation where it's always going to be a base local authority fee rate for that home in that local market? And obviously, providers want to provide the best possible facilities to all their residents, undoubtedly, but there is also a financial implication here, which comes through to local authority funding. And
Sure.
If the local authorities put the fee rates up a bit more, then that unlocks a lot more opportunity for investment.
Yeah. No, okay, brilliant. So now just turning to the future of the healthcare sector. Obviously, we're all aware of the stress on the financing from the NHS. So in your assessment going forward, how do you see the potential development of the funding model for the healthcare sector?
Well, I think funding touches every part of the healthcare market, whether it's elderly care homes, whether it's SEN schools that we do a lot with, and I have a personal interest there. I'm a trustee of a specialist school. Whether it's the dental situation, there's a lot in the press at the moment about difficulties in actually being able to find an NHS dentist depending on where you live. This all comes down to funding, and it comes down to sort of the overriding, the main point, which is as a country we have a more complex range. We have a greater range of health conditions perhaps than we've had before. We have a really aging population. People are living longer with much greater degree of acuity, and that has to be appropriately funded. And obviously in this country we have potentially an election coming through soon. So I'm not going to sort of predict either way which way that goes.
No.
But the social care and the healthcare funding has been a tricky topic for many different governments over recent years, and it will be interesting to see how it's grasped by whoever the next government is.
Okay.
So I'm sitting on the fence entirely.
Nice. No, fair enough. And then just coming back, and you obviously we've spoken about the real estate, and obviously that is a key part of delivering the healthcare provision to the country. So how do you see the going forward the demand and the supply of that real estate, and sort of the challenges and the main drivers for each segment of the healthcare?
At a starting point, everyone's getting older. Keep coming back to this point. We the number of people over 80 years of age is steadily increasing, and in many parts of the country we haven't really seen much new build development at all, and that's a big challenge. The planning system is making it harder to get planning consents through for new build developments, which is causing a lot of issues for developers and operators. So actually, the biggest challenge fundamentally is having sufficient new build product across the country to meet need. And you have some areas, as I say, that haven't seen new build development for years. And will they ever? Well, that will depend on the funding system. So that is the key thing. But as I say, the demand drivers are incredibly strong. We just have to find a way of meeting that need. And the same can be applied to other parts of the market. If you look at, for example, SEN schools, specialist schooling. I live in Norfolk, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of kids in Norfolk that have an education health care plan, and there's only a small number of spaces in specialist provision there.
Wow.
People have diagnoses. They need to have the care and support required to sort of meet their needs, which means more investment, a requirement for more investment. I say, a great opportunity for investors coming in. Everything is a needs-driven industry.
No, absolutely. Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Michael. I just want to finally just touch on a little bit about Christie & Co.
Yeah.
So you've been a long servant there since 2002. And
22 years this year.
Yeah, congratulations. So if you could just give us a little bit of an idea of how Christie & Co. advise and support your clients, whether that's in the healthcare sector, whether that's developers, operators, or investors.
Oh, delighted to. I've been with Christie & Co now for 22 years, which is scary. Been in the sector for 26, which is even scarier. As a business, we deal with what we call operational real estate, and essentially there are two components: the property part and there's the business part. And essentially, we transact and we advise on both. So the anchor part of our business is M&A, buying and selling, and we cover the whole market from assets in the regions to the bigger portfolios to new developments to capital market type stuff. So we support people looking to sell or businesses looking to sell their assets or investors looking to sell. We support people that are looking to buy something and require due diligence, whether that's valuation work, whether that's commercial due diligence, consultancy advice, and a whole variety of other things. And we also do a lot of work just talking to people that are thinking about coming into the sector, particularly investors who maybe have invested in other parts of the property industry. Maybe they've been a little bit deterred by the fact that it is a regulated market with a regulator, but they actually like the needs-driven underpin. And we're doing more and more of that now across all of the healthcare markets that we cover. I mean, we cover everything from children's services through to elderly care. We also have within this sort of a medical division covering pharmacy and dental. And in social care, that whole space is so vast in terms of all the different sort of subsectors. And as a business, we have people that specialise in each one of those subsectors. So my team, we work across everything, working very closely with our colleagues, just to provide good advice to our clients. And as I say, I've been in this role for 26 years, and it's the people in the industry that I really enjoy. It keeps me fresh. It keeps me motivated. Yeah. There are always new products. There's always new things happening, and that makes us evolve as an advisor as well.
Brilliant. Oh, well, thanks very much, Michael, and thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. It's been enjoyable and very insightful. So thanks for that, and thank you to all our listeners out there for listening to our podcast, Real Insights. See you soon.